وحايقو مقالا قربها وادكم ميلانتيني ما كستي يردلانكي بربارا عيمودو تولي midabkeedni diidaa la yidhi maaranaan jiraye midabkeedni diidaa la yidhi maaranaan jiraye haddii laga
assalaamu calaykum waxaan ku hormarinaynaa marka hore programka afkeenii hooyo si aad inta badan u fahantaan shirkan asaga halkan aan isugu nimid ujeedadiisana uu yahay titleka halka ku yaala gadaal sidee diasporada halkan ku nool ee baaxadda weyn ay uga hadli kartaa tala midaysanna uga yeelan kartaa shirka la wado inuu ka dhaco February oo ay iclaamisay dowladda UK waxaanu nahay community buuxa majority Somali diaspora UK meel kasta ay ku nooshahay largest community ayaanu nahay kuwaasoo isugu jiro field kasta sector kasta marka ujeedada anagu Somali diaspora UK ahaan aanu isu xilqaano waxay tahay in aanu helno opportunity lagu maqlo codkayaga saala aldigate waxaan aad ugu faraxsanahay inaan idin sheego shirkan asaga halkan ka dhacaya inaan isugu yeernay aqoonyahan women representative elderski inta liiraha opinion leader waxaan rabnaa in qof kasta oo Soomaali ana ajandaha halkan anaga aan u nimid in uusan ka bixin waxa weeye ajandaha very clear sida Somali diaspora UK proudly host Somali conference in London for the causes and stability in Somalia and recommendation from the diaspora at the upcoming conference in February 2012 that is what the agenda is waxaa jiri doona su'aalo iyo jawaabo dadku fikirkooda lagu aruurin doono oo qof walba inuu gacan taago wuxuu oranaya ama uu ka daro inuu ka hadlana inuu fikirkiisa dhiibto waana fikir anaga purely aanu rabno xog ku aruurinayno sidee loo heli karaa nabadda luntay ee Soomaaliya sidee fikirkiinu yahay lagu heli karaa nabadda maxaa soo dhaweyn kara nabadda marka ajandaha asaga inaan focus ku ahaano qof walba fikirkiisa uu ka dhiibto la nood gareeyo ayaa muhiim ah marka intaas way muhiimadda waxaan kaloo aad ugu faraxsanahay in shirkan asaga ah ay ka soo qayb galeen consularo MPyo shadow ministero iyadoo waliba shirkan asaga ah markaan hadalkayga ka baxo ay noo share gareyn doonto former minister government and local MP in South Brent Frankenna down Butler marka insha Allah bidnillahi kareem I am proud to welcome to you in the stage of the conference. Down Butler, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Wa idin Somalia. Magagu wa don. Sort of learning small bits. But I think yes, I'll stick to English. It is a pleasure to be here to chair this conference today, this important conference today that's been organised by the Somalia Diaspora UK. And I just want to read one quick paragraph from the agreement between the Transitional Federal Government of Somalia and Halu Sunnah Wal Jama'ah, who says that the TFG and ASWJ pledged their resolve to mobilise the Somali people both in the country and in the diaspora to support the Djibouti process and the TFIs and fight against terrorism and extremism and for the reconstitution of the Somalian nation. It's all about making sure that Somalia is a peaceful place, and that's what this conference is about, looking at the solutions for Somalia from the diaspora, and that's why I'm proud to be here today. I'm going to start the speeches off very quickly because we've got a lot of speeches and a lot of time for you to ask questions. I'm going to start off with Navin Shah, who's the Assembly Member for Brent and Harrow and a very good friend of the Somali people. And I'm going to hand over to Navin Shah to start off today.
Brothers and sisters, good evening and salam alaikum. It is a tremendous opportunity to be here And I'd like to thank Don Butler, my colleague, former MP for Brent, and a former Minister for Youth Engagement and Youth Citizens. This is a tremendous opportunity that we have. An important community, a large community like the Somali that we have in London and in the UK. We obviously have a serious agenda for tonight and obviously what happens in February and time to come. I'm very proud that Somali Diaspora UK is actually based in Brent, in my constituency, in the area that I live. In Brent and Harrow, which is what I represent, northwest London suburbs, we do not have very large Somali community like the other parts of London, but like areas of South Harrow, I have a significant community from Somalia which lives very happily, and we work together. Similarly, Brent as well has got a similar part of constituent bodies. Now, obviously, tonight's agenda, I say, whilst largely it is about the situation back home, which I think is critical, very, very critical in terms of unity of Somalia, the upcoming elections, various issues like famine, like humanitarian issues. They are so, so critical for now and for the future, for the progress of Somalia. Similarly, here we have challenges. Whilst we have something like 700,000 Somali community within the UK, certainly what we also have are challenges, but with challenges come opportunities. Now, I'm pleased, like the Indian, the Asian communities, one of the issues in the forefront of Somali community is education. Education is so important to lay the foundation for the youth, for the next generation. And also I'm pleased that particularly girls, women are doing pretty well when it comes to attain standards in education, when it comes to local learning, etc. I'd like to say that I am with the community all the way when it comes to major issues, challenges that face Somalia, as well as the community here, both in the parts of London that I represent, as well as overall. So as one of your colleagues, what I call extended family friend, I wish you luck with Somali community. So I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me and have a lovely conference. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce to you another good friend, Rushnara Ali MP, for Bethnal Green and Bow. She's also the Shadow DFID Minister. And not only that, she has recently taken the initiative to launch a Somali Friends Group, which is pretty incredible. So I'd like to introduce to you Rushnara Ali MP.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. But first of all, it's a great privilege to be here addressing you. I was elected in 2010 in the constituency of Bethnal Green and Bow. How many of you are from Bethnal Green and Bow? Okay, a few of my constituents here. Well, I just want to say that, as many of you know, my constituency has one of the largest Somali communities in the country, and I'm really proud of that. And I'm really proud of the way that the community supported me in my election. I was one of 3 Muslim women to have ever got elected into Parliament, and that was in 2010. And that's thanks to the support I got from across the constituency, but also notably, you know, you never hear this in the media, but notably, not just from the women whose support I needed and counted on, but from the men. And it's thanks to that collective support, including and especially from the men in our community, in the Muslim community, a story that you rarely hear about, that I was able to get elected. And that is a credit to the constituency that I'm from. So I start by giving you a big thank you for that support. Thank you. I want to focus today on 3 key themes. You will all have had a chance, I'm sure, to think about what you want to see coming out of the February conference. And I do not pretend to be an expert on Somalia or Somali politics, but what I hope I can do is act as a friend to you in the Somali diaspora here in Britain, but also act as a strong advocate for this community in this country, but also for the people in Somalia who desperately need representation around the world in parliaments, in our parliament, but also in many others, to speak up for them as they face one of the worst famines in recent history, in over 2 decades. And we all have a responsibility, whether we are of Somali origin, of Muslim origin, or non-Muslim origin, as UK citizens, to speak up for those people who are suffering at the moment. So the first thing I think we need to focus on is the humanitarian challenge facing Somalia and the wider region. The second thing is around the conflict both within Somalia and the wider region. And I pose questions. I don't have the answers. I hope that you will be able to advise me on what we should be doing in Parliament across the different parties to feed in ideas in the conference. I haven't had an invite yet because I'm not in government, but I hope that we will get an invite or have the opportunity to feed those views. Certainly in opposition terms we can. The third and critical point is about how the British Somali community can interact with parliamentarians, with councillors across the different parties, not just my party, but across the different parties, to get your voices heard, because you've got the intelligence on the ground through your connections, through your family networks, through your relationships, in order to feed in some of the insights that you're getting ahead of policymakers and politicians. So that's the third key plank of what we need to be doing. And I would say we need to think about how we organise ourselves. So I think those are the 3 key issues for us. Now, you know all too well just how serious the situation is. 4 million people, of that 4 million, 53% of the Somali population are facing disaster given the famine. Now, things have started to improve a little bit, but not enough. And we know what the big challenges are. That is about access in terms of the aid. Oh, that's done then. So that is about access to aid, making sure the aid agencies can get in, and obviously there's an intersection between that and the conflict that's going on. And it would be helpful to get your perspective on some of those points. Now, what we know is that there was a major challenge around getting funding in and getting the support from the international community. And as it stands, a large proportion of that funding has been pulled together. But in each time there's a humanitarian disaster, what is clear is that the international community takes time to gather the resources, to come together and to deal with that major challenge. And in the meantime, people start to die. And what we saw over the summer is completely unacceptable, that the international community couldn't act fast enough. As the Labour Party, what we did was keep the pressure on the British government to put emergency aid in rapidly and work with regional partners to get support in. And what I would say is that in the February conference, we've heard a lot about the government wanting to talk about the conflict, and that's of course welcome. It's very important that the international community, working with the Somali diaspora and getting their perspective in, can come at and look at how the conflict is resolved. So I hope that we can work together, not only in the run-up to February, so that I can hold the current government to account and make sure your voice is fed through in Parliament. But I also hope that in the long term, what we do is make sure that we have a strong voice for this community in local councils, in Parliament, and in our national life. as the first person of British Bangladeshi heritage and the first woman of British Bangladeshi heritage to have got elected to Parliament, I know how powerful it is to make sure that there's strong representation. And so I hope that I'll be the person who spots the next first Somali woman MP for Parliament. I've already found a few, and I'm looking forward to getting them selected in the run-up to the next election. Thank you very much for your support, and I look forward to working with you.
International operations and strategic planning. I'm going to introduce Carl to give you a short address. Thank you, Carl.
Well, probably more appropriate. I'm head of news and current affairs at Islam Channel. I'm here because our CEO, who was billed to be your guest, had to fly urgently overseas, and so it was a great honour for me to be asked at short notice to come in his place. I sadly, a bit like the politicians on both sides of me, have to shoot off much sooner than I might like, so you will hopefully forgive me. I'd like to say that I'm especially pleased to be at this conference, to be media partners with the Somalia Diaspora UK, and as you can see, our cameras are here in the room, and we'll be broadcasting the proceedings today, with your blessing hopefully, on the channel for a much wider audience. Now, I'd like to start by saying that for many years Somalia has been close to my heart. When I was last in Somalia, maybe that's not too good a confession, it was back in 1994. I was a journalist guest of the United Nations Humanitarian Commission for Refugees, and I remember as I lay on a camp bed within one of the NGO compounds, protected by not much more than a mosquito net that surrounded me, I listened in the very early hours of the morning on my mini portable radio to the crystal clear broadcast of the BBC World Service as they announced the latest details of an attack between General Aidid and the so-called US Operation Restore Hope forces. The offensive announced that General Aidid and 40 of his men had been arrested, although a few hours later that seemed to have somehow been overturned. I'd found it necessary in the days preceding that to run the gauntlet of gunfire in the Bardera region, known to the NGOs at the time as no man's land, in order to visit the many overstretched and under-resourced humanitarian agencies that were operating in the area. I witnessed with sadness the desperate expressions on the faces of the mothers as they fanned the flies from the eyes of their sickened and wasted bodies of their infants. I saw the bloated stomachs of the young children wheezing as a result of chronic malnutrition. I watched grown men, fathers, sons, brothers, lay stricken with malaria, coughing, as indeed you seem to be now, on stretchers under tarpaulin in their final death throes. I remember meeting the young boys, too old for their years, rescued from forced enlistment with the militias. I had scanned the lengthy queues of families desperate, waiting for medication, having often walked for dozens of miles in a desperate bid to find a remedy for the plague which had befallen them. Little did they all often appreciate that in many cases the medicine was useless while they remained so desperately malnourished. Some had actually walked for up to 20 or 30 miles from other medical posts in the belief that more of the same medicine might make them better quicker. Actually, ironically, it was exactly the opposite. I saw a dignified, proud people. I spoke to doctors, architects and engineers. Mostly they were focused in Mogadishu, I have to admit, but all reduced to living on meagre handouts of grain, while around them their country continued to be ravaged by the onslaught of a war. I did not expect the need to be covering their story. the story of a desperate and failed state for what's coming up to nearly a decade on our channel. I did not expect to be standing here 18 years later, reflecting on an even more severe crisis in the region, and by any measuring stick, this current crisis in the Horn of Africa is of biblical proportions. Somalia is experiencing the worst famine the world has witnessed in a generation. The result, not least, and not alone, of the region's worst drought for 60 years. The UN estimates that a quarter of the Somali population is now displaced, some 1.5 million people and more than 10 million in need of immediate food and food assistance, or they will face starvation. There will be many questions that will challenge you all here today, and I'm sure in the conference in February. Chief among them will be how we can establish a stable government in Somalia, without which, let's be frank, any humanitarian rescue program will be totally ineffective. And there are other questions, and of course the future of Somalia will remain in the balance. Naturally, we will all be taxed on the crucial question, could this humanitarian crisis have been prevented? We will ask why there are not more decisive responses to the obvious warning signs 6 months, a year, 2 years ago. What are the moral implications of the current strategies of our governments here in the West in supporting the peoples of Somalia? To what degree has Somalia's vast oil and gas reserves and other natural resources such as uranium played a role in the recent upscaled interest in the region? Are the attempts by our own governments to classify Somalia as the new hotbed of terrorist activity made with any reasonable justification, or is there in fact an ulterior motive? Fundamentally, you will ask, who is it that really speaks for the interests of the Somali people? In a 12-month period, which has witnessed the dramatic overthrow of the tyrannical regimes as the wind of hope sweeps across the Middle East and North Africa, we must not fail to rise to the challenge and live up to the bid to rid our world of the cancerous plague of famine and injustice. To all those who make up the vanguard of this noble cause, to all those throughout the Muslim world and outside it who believe in fairness, in dignity and in justice, now is the time for action.
Mohammed Hashi Aga, please, can you please come up, please?
For the first time, I would like to thank to all those who organized this meeting, and particularly to Dan Butler. Actually, I sent an advancing note with regard to the forthcoming conference that His Excellency the Prime Minister of Britain, David Cameron, has announced. I had congratulated with that wholeheartedly. We sincerely welcome and we attach with a great hope. Why? warqad baan hadda kooru soo gudbiyey anoo ka hadlaya shirka soo socda iyo Soomaalidu waxa ay u aragto taas waanu soo dhaweynaynaa laakiin it begs the question su'aal bay warsanaysaa. It is almost the 21st years that Somalia has suffered in human term, in natural term, in ecological and habitat term, and environmental term, in which millions and millions of the Somali either die or in injury. So the question is, if the Britain now came forward, hadiba ay soo baxday Britain, we welcome that Britain could take a leading role in a qaadato tilaabo with leading role. Why? For the first 21st years, there is no genuine, I put it that way, and I like that you, and through you, you extended our gratitude, but our concern to the Great Britain and its administration. there was no genuine Somali National Reconciliation Conference, never. Ma dhicin shir Soomaaliya conference oo lagu heshiinay ma dhicin. Waxaan u malaynayaa inaad diidi doontaan oo oran doontaan maxaa jira kii carte kii hebel kii magaciisi. None of them constitute ma uusan istaajinaynin the basis of what is called two things. One is a resolution management of the of crisis. Other is the crisis resolution. There are two different terms. يعني إن la xaqiijiyo oo la daboolo oo la hagaajiyo dhibaato taagan iyo xalku hadduu fogaado oo crisis gaaro in xal go'aan laga gaaro. What international terms? There are no other third word.
I'm going to introduce Councillor Mohammed Butt, the Deputy Leader of Brent Council. I know that you're prepared to speak about young people and things, but I wondered if you could maybe also address the diaspora on how they can get involved in the political system locally, because I really do think that we need more Somalia representation in our democracy in this country as well. So I wondered if you could talk them through the process and what they need to do.
My family came in the 60s and they all had the aspiration to go back to Pakistan. But events overtook them. And since the 60s, we've been here. And since then, we have become part of the society. In order to become part of the society, my family had to make some, commitments to the children. I think what we need to keep in mind and bear in mind is the impact we're having on our children at the moment. Somalia has had nearly 2 decades, just over 2 decades of conflict, and the people who are suffering most are yourselves and the children. If we don't look after the children are going to be failing, and that is what is happening in some of our schools today. In Brent, we have over 3,000 children from Somali background, and most of those children are failing. Why are they failing? Because of the support that we are failing to give them from ourselves. Because we are fractious amongst ourselves. We have got so many divisions amongst ourselves. We forget to look after ourselves. We look after our families, look after our children. As a councillor in Brent, as a Labour councillor, right, as Carl said, right, it is about fairness and dignity. And we need to give our children fairness, dignity, and hope. If we don't give those children a hope from the conferences that are going to be coming, right, because those children are going to be the people that will be taking over from us. Those children need the education, need the aspirations coming from us, and we need to give them the opportunities. And how can we give those opportunities? We are, like I said, we're all in the UK at the moment, right? We have access to facilities and resources which are not available to anybody else outside. Everything in the UK is available to you free at use. Education, health, everything else. Why aren't we making use of these facilities? Make use of these facilities. If you use these facilities, it will only benefit you and your children and your goals of having a stable government in Somalia. Right? How can you do that? You are all here. I have been involved in local politics. Roshanara has been involved. Dawn's been involved. We have been involved. And the only way is getting involved in politics and by having a voice. Use that voice. Stand up for yourselves, right? So tell us what you need, right? How we can help you, how we can deliver for your children. And then your children will be able to deliver for you and have that peaceful country that we all aspire for. How can you get involved? Like I said, we all have access to our local councillors, MPs, right? Work with us. Go out with us into the communities. Learn about how we set policies, set agendas, and all these things that will take us forward. I'm a local councillor. I've been encouraging all our local youth to come forward to work with us so that they can learn how they can get involved in politics and take things forward.
sida uu arko arrimaha pirateska kana mid ah qodobooyinka maanta ay dawladda UK conference-ga ay qaban doonto 2012ka ka ugu horeeyo uu yahay arrinta pirateska maadaama badaha Soomaaliyeed ay very important tahay shipska vessel-ka halkaas maro ee important trade route tahay bal experience-kiisii Soomaaliya sidoo u tagay sidoo asagu u arko in lagu xallin karo pirateska saasaan ugu yeernay waa ku mahadsantahay daahir waqtiga time-ka aad siisay diasporada with anagu raadinayna xog expertna aad ku tahay arrintaas iyada ah ku soo dhawow insha Allah wixii aad ka aragteen adiga insha Allah nagu soo gudbiso aan kadibna aan input u gelin insha Allah assalaamu calaykum
ugu horreyntii waxaan salaamayaa dhammaan ka qaybgalayaasha madasha hadday yihiin MB-yada councilorska iyo dhammaan bulshada qaybaheeda kala duwan ee Soomaaliyeed ka soo qayb gashay madashan maxaa dhaliyay burcadda maadaama la yiri gaar uga waran burcadda b sidee loo joojin karaa c kaalinteen noo bannaan haddaan nahay dadka ku nool dalka dabadiisa d seebay u arkaan bulshada Soomaaliyeed burcadda ka jirta Soomaaliya waa sameeqan nooc waxaan jeclahay inaan u kala qaado afartaas hab haddaan ka jawaabo mid koowaad waxaa dhaliyay burcadbadeedda dhowr arrimood oo aan isleeyahay kow waxaa ka mid ah dowlad la'aanta baahday ee ka jirtay Soomaaliya 21 sano oo la soo dhaafay labo shaqo la'aanta ka dhalatay dowlad la'aanta saddex waqtiyadii bilowga ahaa oo la dhihi karo waxaa gacan ka qaatay ama sahlay in ay samaysmaan kooxo hubaysan oo badda aada maraakiib si sharci darro ah uga kalluumaysata badda Soomaaliya isla markaasna si xun ula dhaqmay kalluumaysatadii localka ahayd sida iyagoo ka jarjaray nadkii ama shabagadihii ay xeebta dhigteen waayo maadaama cid ka ilaalisa aysan jirin markasta waxay imaanayeen maraakiibta illegal fishing-ka waxay ku soo dhawaanayeen xeebta taasoo xataa mamnuuc ah marka labaad iyagoo markay jarjareen shabagadihii haddana markay arkaan local fishermanka iyagoo ku furayay biyo kulul oo pipe ah tubooyinka ay ka soo furayaan caradaas oo qaan gaartay suuro geli weysana in laga kalluumaysto xeebta ayaa waxay keentay iyo sharci la'aantii jirtay in la sameeyo reaction-ka waxaa iska kaashaday dadkii fishermanada ahaa oo lahaa aqoonta badda iyo sida loo maro badda iyo rag gunman oo shaqo la'aani haysay halkaa shaqa ka abuurantay balse maanta lama dhihi karo inamadeennu waxay ilaalinayaan xuquuq ka maqan way xadgudbeen iyakuna waxay gaareen inay limitkii ay lahaayeen ay ka baxaan ayagoo ka dhigtay piracy-gii business joogta ah b waxaa loo joojin karaa dhowr nooc oo ay ka mid yihiin in la taageero lagana qayb qaato dhismo dowlad qaran oo hanata dalka dhammaantiis kana hortagta in laga fuliyo dalka dhexdiisa falal argagixiso ama mid burcadnimo intaba iyo wixii la mida labo in la wacyigeliyo dadka ku dhaqan xeebaha Soomaaliya gaar ahaan kuwa ay ka jiraan burcadbadeedu hadda sida Puntland iyo gobollada dhexe saddex in la maalgeliyo lana abuuro fursado shaqo si ay dhalinyaradu uga maaranto khatarta ay ku sugan yihiin xeebaha Soomaaliyana ay u noqdaan kuwa ammaankoodu sugan yahay marka aan sidaas leeyahay waxaan ogahay in aysan jeclayn dadka Soomaalidu burcadda oo haddii la abuuro better life ama fursad ay dadku ku shaqaystaan iyo dhalinyaradu aysan ogolaan doonin dadka deegaanadaas in ay ku soo xiraan dhalinyaradu maraakiibta ay soo qafaashaan deegaanadooda kaalinta kaalinta u bannaan dadka Soomaaliyeed ee diasporada ah waxay tahay waxaan la wada soconnaa in ay xushmad weyn u hayaan dadka ku nool dalka dhexdiisa dadka diasporada ah taasoo ay keentay taageerada dhaqaale ay siiyaan diasporadu qaraabadooda iyo saaxiibadooda ku nool dalka dhexdiisa sidaas awgeed waxaan geysan karnaa in aan ka wacyigelinno dadkeenna xumaanta oo dhan sida burcadbadeedda iyo argagixisada caalamiga ah waxayna naga filayaan in aan dhisno bridge u dhexeeya iyaga iyo bulshada caalamka gaar ahaan bulshada UK oo aan ka mid nahay halkaasna ay ka soo baxdo is-afgarad waara oo dhex mara dadka Soomaaliyeed iyo bulshada caalamka oo ay u horeyso dawladda UK iyo shacabkeedu diasporada waxaa laga sugayaa in ay u istaagaan siday ula shaqayn lahaayeen dawladdeena UK oo hadda ku baaqday sidii loogu heli lahaa xal waara dalka iyo dadka Soomaaliyeed waana in aan ku dadaalnaa in aan fahamsiino dawladdeena baahida runta ah si loo asiibo xalka dhabta ah oo aysan dhicin in annagoo joogna wax laga weydiiyo arrimaha Soomaaliya dad ajnabi ah waayo annaga British Soomaali ah dadka Soomaaliyeed waxay u arkaan in ay jirto laba burcad kuwaasoo kala ah burcadbadeed Soomaali ah iyo burcadbadeed caalami ah sida kuwa haraadiga sunta waxgumaada ku shuba badda Soomaaliya iyo kuwa sida sharci darrada ah uga kalluumaysta badda Soomaaliyeed waxayse ku kala duwan yihiin dhanka sharciga taasoo loo arko in ay joogaan badda Soomaaliya maraakiib fara badan oo maraakiib dagaal ah balse ugaarata burcadda Soomaaliyeed kaliya oo aan marnaba sharciga horkeenin burcadda kale ee caalamiga ah waana wax la isweydiinayo why ay u dhacday mar hadday xeebaha joogaan maraakiibtaas dhaqaalaha aan loo baahnayn oo ay ku soo siyaadiyeen piratesiga Soomaaliya adduunka 2010 wuxuu ahaa $10 billion su'aashaan idin weydiinayaa waxay tahay why international community haddayba qirteen 1 year in lagu isbandigareeyay ay koosgareeyeen burcadbadeedda Soomaalidu unnecessary expense $10 billion why international community ay 30% lacagtaas ka mida ay ugu investigareey waayeen Soomaaliya si loo helo dawlad hanata ilaalinta dalka Soomaaliya cirka iyo dhulka iyo badda waa mahadsantiin wabillahi tawfiiq
waxaan inii sheegayaa maanta nasiib darro dalka wuxuu gacanta ugu jiraa waad ogtihiinoo hadda ninkii noo sheegay wuxuu yidhi burcadbadeed baa la leeyahay burcadbadeedda maxaa abuuray isticmaar baa abuuray waxaa la oran jiray waagii dagaalka lagu jiray halganka lagu jiray ha la iska ilaaliyo isticmaarka cusub marka Soomaaliya maanta waxaa gacanta isugu jira isticmaarkii cusba wuxuuna helay dad wax magarad ah oo u shaqaynaya iyaga marka waxaa loo baahan yahay in gacmaha isqabataan runta la isku sheego maanta dalka annaga in baa badbaadi karnaa khaasatan weli diasporada ingiriiska joogta ama London kuwaas ayaa badbaadin kara gacmaha isqabano ee aan badbaadino shirkaana inaan door weyn ku yeelano waaye maxaa yeelay waa fursadda kaliya oo noo hartay 21 sano ka bacdi maanta fursadda noo hartay waa tan
haddaad abuukar aragtaan waxaa isleediin qaad buu aadayaa laakiin shaki kuma jiro runtii shaki kuma jiro haddii la leeyahay aan ka hadalno xal u raadinta horumarinta iyo deganaanta waddankeenna ma aaminsantiin inuu qaadku dhibaato ka mid yahay dhibaatooyinka yes thank you marka qaadku one good news baan uga baxayaa TV badanna way joogaan niyadda ku haya waxaa la yiri wixii rag u kaco rabbina aqbalo waa rumoobaan niyadda ku haya 2012 qaad inuusan Yurub oo dhan online insha Allah. And may I just say, I was a young man in the streets of Brent who was looking for help. And here she is. The first MB who took me to the corridors of Power, House of Parliament, me, Yimurduf Keganot. So give her a big clap. Don't butler, please. Kofiyat Kalan Gashanaya, recently by Wahala E. Magaaway, Director Communication ka Somali Journal. That's why I'm Tabelan is good at the And so Wahal is Rinikan Wadari when the other guy, run to the two shakera. Anigo Kohadlaya, Maga Somali Journal, Director Kisa Good, Mahdi Bokah, the Man Shakalaha, Wuriyash Melbe Jogamba, Wahan Udin Balangadena, Inan Udin Tilmano, Tupta Tosan, Wahan Udin Balangadena, Inan Nakagaban, Inan Nakagaban. Haddii resolution la rabo in la helo waan ognahay meediyadu powerful ka ay leedahay anoo magaca Somali Journal ku hadlaya waxaan ku dhiiranaynaa oo aan ku kalsoonahay insha Allah inaanu si tafatiran oo xal ah oo runta ku jirto aan u tabino arrimaha Soomaaliya waxaan sidoo kale barmood garaynaynaa ama taageeraynaa ama kor u qaadaynaa maamul wanaaga nin allaale ninkii dadaalo siyaasiya sidoo kale waa iga ballan anoo communication ka magacooda ku hadlaya hadalkaana meel ila qora ninkii madax ah oo geeska Afrika ka soo kaca oo musuqmaasuq iyo khaa'inimo iyo fursadahan oo kale ka faa'iideysan waaye toosh afarqaada inaan ku afiyo waan igu ogtiin waan igu ogtihiin raggaas banaystay dhiigga ummadda Soomaaliyeed raggaas banaystay inaan cidna la hadli karin inaan toosh afarqaada ku ifiyo oo la daba galay sida qaadkii waan anigu hadal badan ma sheego intaasaan idinkaga soo koobayaa waxaa ii haray role of diasporada maxamed cilmi inuu initiative kan qaato anigu ku degdegi maayo waxaan leeyahay all eyes sidii speakerkii hore yiri dawlado yaryar oo ajenda gooniya leh oo daris ah oo tabartooda limited tahay baa host gareeyay waa one of the most powerful countries waxa host gareynaya Great Britain all eyes ku waa meetingkaas ku degdegi maayo on behalf of Somali Journal waan monitor gareynaynaa waan eegaynaa waan la soconaynaa when the time comes kuna waqtigu markuu yimaadana statement yaano ka soo saaraynaa hadday dan ugu jirto Soomaali haddii kale de toosh afarqaada ugu egtiin wassalaamu calaykum wa rahmatullaahi wa barakaatuh
thank you
horta marka ugu horeysa 22 sano dagaalamaynaa waxaan rabno ma ognahay okay nabadaan rabnaayaan dhahna mar walba nabadaan rabnaa nabadii dad bay nagala dhaxaysaa oo waa kan caawa halkan waxaan u fadhinaa shir UK ay qaban doonto waxaan ka sheegi lahayn iyo waxaan gudubsan lahayn waxa marka halkaas kaaga cad inaan isku filnayn annagu nabada aan rabno inaan kaligaan keeni karin in la xukumaayo waxaan rabnaa marka bulshaweynta caalamka dadka la magac baxay ama international community inaan midba mar noo imanina ay noo midoobaano waxay naga rabaan iyo waxay rabaan inay noo qabtaan horta inaan ogaano ta kale waxa muhiim ah dadka markaan la hadlayno inaan niyad wanaagsan aan kula hadalno imise qof annaga inaga mid ah halkaan joogta caawa oo qalbigoodu aanay xumaan ku jirin arrintu isu sheegno qof walba qalbigiisa meel ku jira shir kasta naloo qabto waxba ka faa'iidi mayno ilaa iyo 91 maalinta isdilka isku bilownay ayaa shir naloo bilaabay qof walba oo shir noo qabanayna ha ogaata waa inaan ogaanaa in isagu uu iska dhigayo inuu annaga danaheena raadinayo laakiin maybe waxa dhici karta inaanu danaheena raadinayn shir walba markaan tagayno inaan horta negativity iska dhaafno oo aan positive ku tagno hase ahaatee aan dareenkeena qabno
ayaa hadda waxaa nala taagan afhayeenka jaaliyadda oo ah Cabdiweli Shaqaale. Cabdiweli, shirkan horta maxaa loo qabtay ahmiyadiisa?
waa mahadsantahay cawaale. shirkan muhiimadiisu waxaa loo qabtay maadaama ingiriisku uu yahay dowlad weyn, shirna ay cilaamisay 23 February asa diaspora ahaan inaan input ku yeelano shirkaas oo aan ku casuuno annaga haddaan nahay diasporadii all sectorska iyo fieldiska Soomaalida oo dhan. tusaale ahaan markaan kusoo qaato Somali technocrats, Somali civil society, Somali elders, then taskigaas inta xog ka qorna inaan input uga dhigno shirka soo socda ayaa muhiimadda shirka ayuu ah.
And UK is hosting an international conference for Somalia. What do you hope the outcome would be for this meeting?
Assalamu alaikum. I hope that the outcome of this meeting will be that the international government, not just the UK government, the international government listens to the diaspora. Because what often happens is governments, when they have conferences, they operate at a different level and don't often get what the people on the ground think and want for their country. And overwhelmingly, what came across today is what people are saying. They suffered 2 decades. Somalia suffered 2 decades of war. They now have famine. Almost 500,000 people have died. What they want is peace and stability and a good government. And it means the agreement that was signed in March 2010 means that what we want to see is the diaspora here and internationally and in Somalia linked together in order to accomplish that peace. And I think the Somali channel, I think the Islamic channel, I think all of the organizations are getting together because there's a real possibility after 20 years that we may well see peace in Somalia, and I hope that happens.
That Somali channel, they are part of sponsors and always they are working in integrations to the community. Marka sala ayligeed kulay waxaan anaga arkaa aad ugu faraxsanahay in Somali channel inay yihiin dadka hartiga ah conference-gan asaga aan qabanay sponsor gareeyay always na u taagan in ay ka qayb qaataan waxyaabaha danaha dadka Soomaaliyeed loogu fulinayo.
aad iyo aad baad u mahadsantahay gudoomiye.
kale waxaan ku faraxsanahay inaan aragnay dad badan oo Soomaali ah runtii aad moodid inay arkeen dhibaatada ay maaragtay soo arkeen 20 sano ugu dambeysay haddana ay xoogaa soo yara bislaadeen inay maaragtay aayahooda ka tashtaan ayna runtii tahay in nin islaamiyadu waxba ku qaban karin laakiin ay tahay in nin qof kasto Soomaali ah danahooda iyaga ay ka tashtaan.
shirkan waa shir wanaagsan oo si fiican loo abaabulay. waxaan filaynaa horta ajandooyinka ay sheegeen dawladda Ingiriiska waa badda iyo danahoodii marka anaga waxaan ka hadlaynay waxay ahayd in danaheena wixii ah inaan u gudbino meeshana aniga waxaan ka jeeday in guddi la sameeyo ka hadlo waxaas kadibna loo gudbiyo wixii dana noo ah anaga Soomaaliyeed.